Hey guys, welcome back to KS Core Tech. My name's Garrett, and today it's time for another printer review. Now, this one's a little bit different. This is an SLA printer compared to the normal FDM printers that I've reviewed in the past, like my Robo R1 and my XYZprinting DaVinci 1.0 Pro. Now, this is actually from XYZprinting as well. This is the Nobel 1.0A. They do also have just a normal Nobel 1.0, so the A is a different machine. It's an upgraded machine from the Nobel 1.0, so whether you have that A on there or not does make a difference on what machine you're looking at. So I think in order to give this review, I need to put a little bit of a disclaimer at the beginning. And I'm actually going to call this sort of a mini review because it's not a full review. And I'll get into that in this disclaimer section. So the first thing is they sent me this machine. I did not pay for this. They sent it to me for review, and I am going to be sending it back tomorrow actually. So they did not pay me or anything, and everything in this is 100% my own opinion. Not sponsored or anything like that. They just sent this for review. So next, let's discuss the terms of the review. And this is really the reason for me calling it a mini review. I only had this printer to review for 30 days. Now, normally I would not accept 30 days for a review just because that's really not a lot of time to work with the machine and stuff like that. But I was very, very interested in SLA, and I wanted to see what it was all about. So I accepted, and I knew they would be sending me a limited amount of resin as well. So that was the other thing. They sent me 2 bottles of resin. These are 500 grams, so a full kilogram. And that's all I had to use for this review. I could have bought more of this stuff to use, but I didn't want to sink a bunch of money into this and then just have to send the printer back. So I just used what they sent me. But it just really wasn't enough resin to fully form an opinion of this machine. And I'll show you guys in a bit just how much you can actually get out of one of these. But when I actually had this machine in running order, I went to work using it extremely quickly, and I actually used up all the resin I had in the first 2 weeks. So the 30 days wasn't even really a factor. This has just been sitting there for about the past week and a half not doing anything. But I was pretty much printing nonstop. I knew this thing was coming, so I had models prepared. I just started printing. And then there was the issue of getting this machine. So they sent it out, and about a week later it arrived, and I went to work right away putting it together, and very quickly I noticed that I was missing quite a few things out of the box. One of the things was the instruction manual, the USB drive that contains all of the software and the test files, and perhaps most importantly, the tube and lid to actually put on these resin bottles to allow them to function with the machine. So with all the stuff that I got in the original package, I could not use this. Mainly because I had no way of getting the resin into the machine. So I emailed my contact back, let them know that these parts were missing. She apologized and said that she would get those shipped out. So I ended up waiting several more days, and the tracking information that she gave me, I noticed that it was not moving. It still just said information received. So I reached back out, and once again they apologized, and apparently it got lost somewhere and they didn't actually send it out. So they got that fixed. It was sent out that night, and a couple days later I got all of the stuff. It had the lid and the tube to allow me to get resin into the printer, because without that I just couldn't use it. They still did not have the instruction manual or the USB drive that contains the software or the files. Luckily, I was able to find on their website that they have for download all of these things, so I was able to get my hands on them, and I found that you don't even really need the instruction manual to run this thing. It's pretty straightforward. So I was eventually able to get everything that I needed, but it was a huge ordeal, and it really, really makes me worry about the quality assurance over there at XYZprinting. The whole process made me lose a lot of confidence in them. And then one more thing for the disclaimer. This is the first and only SLA printer I've ever used, so I don't have anything to compare it against, just as long as you guys know the frame for which I'm bringing you this mini review. So now that you guys know all that, let's move ahead and I will just sort of talk about my experiences with this machine. So moving past all of the frustrating shipment stuff, I'm just going to start from the point that I actually had everything and I could move forward. So they did include a quick start guide. I was missing the instructions, but the quick start guide was pretty straightforward. They kind of glaze over a few steps, like assembling this lid here. You can see that this lid does come up, but it's pretty straightforward. The pieces only go together pretty much one way. and there's just a couple screws in the top here, so very simple to put together. I could figure that out without instructions. And then the rest of the assembly was pretty easy. This is not a kit, so it does come pretty much assembled. There are just a few pieces you have to put together, and then you have to put some straws in place, and you're pretty much ready to go. So I'd say overall the setup took maybe 2 hours before I was actually printing. So let me run down the quick process of how this works. I'm going to take the lid off here. So this is the insides of the printer. This is your resin. It goes in a little slot right here, and then you replace this cap with the cap that allows these tubes right here to attach to it, and they basically suck the resin out of the bottle into the tank here. And it does come with a tank, so and this just slides into place. It's very, very easy, and this is what fills with resin. And they have a little resin level switch in the back here that sort of rocks to one side to let it know that there is resin in there, so it can detect to some degree if there's resin in there and if it needs to fill up again. Then right here you can see the build plate. This just slides in right here, and you'll just tighten it down. And this carriage right here actually lowers down into the tank, and then a light shines through the base here and cures the resin in place. And then the whole tank tips to one side in what they call a peeling process, which basically rips the resin away from the new layer and allows the next layer to begin. So it just dips down, comes back up, and begins the next layer. And I have to say, bed leveling on this machine is extremely easy. They show you how to do it, but basically what you do is you just click the buttons on the front, lower into the tank once everything's in place, and then you can adjust these 4 screws on the side, and it makes everything perfectly level. And you don't have to do any weird paper tricks. It's just the fact that it's sitting in the tank will make it level, which is extremely nice. I only had to do that once right when I got the printer, and it worked flawlessly ever since. So it does print upside down, but when you're done, you can just use this top knob to unscrew it, pull this off, and you have the piece right there. So the bed is removable, which is extremely handy. And then once you remove the print, you dump it in a bath of alcohol, and they give you this container. They didn't send any alcohol, but it's just isopropyl alcohol. So you can buy it just about anywhere, I think. And you just put a little bit in here. It doesn't need to be much, but you just drop the part into there and kind of swoosh it around a little bit, let it sit. And I actually used a toothbrush to go in there and kind of scrub off the extra resin on the part. And this process usually knocks away any supports you had as well. Now, I did have a little bit of issue removing things from the print bed. They actually stuck extremely well, to the point that I couldn't even use the paint scraper they sent to get it off. What I had to do was use the paint scraper, lodge it under there, and kind of tap it lightly with a hammer to break it free. It worked, and it didn't cause any noticeable damage to the piece or anything like that, but it does scratch up the bed really, really bad. And I did not like that, but I don't really know how to avoid that. I've seen a lot of people using other SLA printers that use like a razor blade to kind of get in there underneath, but ultimately I don't have the solution there, so it's just something to be aware of. In my testing, these scratches did not affect how things stuck to it. In fact, maybe they stuck more, I don't really know. But I have to imagine after months and months, maybe a year of using this, you might need to replace this bed. So that's just something to keep in mind. So about my experiences with this machine itself. From what I can tell, this machine is built very sturdy. I didn't have any sort of machine faults or anything like that. Everything that the machine was supposed to do, it did. I think it works very, very well. Now, that being said, where most of my issues came in was the software that they use. Now, they make you use XYZware, which is their proprietary slicer, which I believe it's free, but they use their own file format, and you cannot just use G-code. This is the same thing for their normal FDM 3D printers, and it's one of my biggest problems with this machine and them as a company. Now, the software does work. I never had it like just fail on me, but it is just extremely, extremely clunky. It is not user-friendly, and I found myself every time I used it just wishing that I could use a different program, because just a lot of the niceties that you would come to expect with normal slicers weren't there. And I find that extremely frustrating. But for everything that I needed to use it for, it pretty much worked. The only issue I had with the actual software working was the supports. It does auto-generate supports, and you can manually place supports. I find that it does a pretty good job of this. The only issue I was running into was they have different size settings for the supports and different densities. So how big the contact point is between the support and the model. And I pretty much found that I had to put both of those on the highest setting to get it to work, and even then sometimes the part ripped away from the supports. Now I don't know if that was an issue with the software or me just not knowing how to position the object correctly to get it to print, but it was an issue that I had. The next issue that I had relates to this tank. So this tank is pretty important because it lets the laser shine through it and hit the resin. And once you've used it enough, it will become cloudy and not let the laser through as well. So you do have to replace these tanks, and I think that's something with pretty much all SLA printers. Now, mine is actually clouding. Granted, I printed a lot of things in the middle, and I think when you're using SLA, you're supposed to move it around. But I only printed about 4 chess pieces right in the center, and then everything else I printed around the sides, and the center is very, very cloudy. And from everything I hear from other people who use SLA, I don't think it should happen this quickly. So again, I don't know if that's something I'm doing wrong or if that's an issue with the tank and or resin and or laser. It's just one of those things that I didn't have enough time or material to properly test this out. Now, my next issue, and it's kind of a gripe more than an issue that I had, is their resin. Now, I think the resin itself is fine. Again, I don't have anything to compare to. I did not have any issues with the resin itself. What I do have an issue with is how XYZprinting makes these proprietary. You cannot use third-party resins in this machine. Not only because it's fit for these bottles, but they actually have an NFC chip in these bottles that the machine reads to tell you how much you've used out of the bottle, which sounds great, but it also prevents you from reusing these bottles. So say that I buy some of their resin, I use the entire thing, and I just say, hey, I want to fill this bottle back up with some cheaper resin that I bought somewhere else, or a different type of resin, and you do that, it won't work because the machine reads the NFC chip and says, hey, I've already used this bottle. So you absolutely can't do that. So if you wanted to buy some third-party resin, you have to buy their first party, dump it out, and then fill this with the third party. And that becomes extremely expensive because 2 of these bottles is $120 US. They've done this with most of their FDM machines as well. They make you use their first-party filament. And they always say that it's in the interest of making it easy to use and detecting when the resin or the filament is out. And while I think there's some truth to that, I also think that it is just a way to sell more products to us. And I just can't respect that. And also I think it goes without saying, but this tank is probably something you're gonna have to buy through them. I don't think there's a standard for these tanks. But since the tank itself has the leveler mechanism on there, I'm gonna assume you're gonna have to go through them and you can't use a third-party tank in this. But that one I can't fault them for as much. I kind of expect that to be the case. So to summarize my thoughts quickly, I think the machine itself is a very good machine. I think it's well built and runs very reliably. Where I have a problem is some of the practices that XYZprinting puts in place with their printers and the software they provide with this, which you do have to use. But overall, my experiences with this printer were good. The prints that I got were amazing, and I'll talk about the print quality here in a little bit. If I was given the choice to keep this printer, I would continue using it and I would buy their resins. Would I buy this printer at full price? No. Now again, I've never used another SLA printer, but given my experiences with this company and printer and the price range of this printer, I would much rather try one of the other options for a lower price point before I went back to this one. Now my opinion of that might change if I had used other SLA printers, but that's just where my head's at now. So now let's talk about the prints themselves, what you can expect there, and how much resin you really get out of these things. Okay, so what you see here is everything that I was able to get out of the resin. Now there were a couple of failed prints. I had 2 of these little pawn pieces fail. One of them was fully printed, one was like halfway printed, and I had one of these slime guys fail about halfway through as well. But otherwise, this is what I was able to get out of both of the 500 gram bottles of resin. And something to keep in mind with these as well is that they are printed 100% solid. There is no infill. If you're a little more conscious and made these things hollow, you'd be able to get quite a bit more out of this resin. To me, all of this felt like roughly the same as a 1 kilogram spool of FDM filament. Somewhere in that ballpark, but just because all of these are completely solid. So the models you're looking at here, they're all created by me. And you can watch these individual videos if you want. I will put links down in the description, because in those videos I kind of talk about my process printing these and the issues that I had. The very first print that I did was this maker coin. It is my maker coin with my logo on it, and it came out pretty much flawlessly. This thing is immaculate. This thing absolutely blew me away. It's perfectly smooth along the layer lines here, and it's printed at 0.1 millimeter layer height, so pretty much the lowest quality you can do on this thing. And it was clear resin, so you can see that these chess pieces here are all still semi-translucent. But as you can see, that these are just, they printed absolutely beautifully. And these would not have come out nearly as pretty as they are on an FDM machine. And these have had zero post-processing. I literally just pulled them off the printer, put them in the alcohol bath, and dried them off. And that resulted in what you see here. And what's really cool about these prints being so good is that you can paint them. My wife painted this. She didn't do any post-processing or sanding or anything like this. This came straight off the printer, and she hit it with a chrome spray paint. And this is the result, and it is just beautiful. Next up, I printed Roberto from Futurama. Yet again, came out absolutely stunningly. Very little post-processing. Most of the post-processing was just cleaning up the little areas where the support's contacted, because there's just little blobs there that you need to sort of file and sand off, but those weren't hard to take care of. But if you look at that, that's not sanded at all. That is absolutely insane. You can't see any layer lines. It's perfectly smooth. And if you look at the detail on the arms, the little rings, at this scale, my FDM printers would not have been able to handle this. After that, I printed Frank from Sausage Party, and you can see by the scale in my hands just how tiny he is and how tiny these limbs are. Now, this is actually a model that I've had for a long time, and I did not print him on FDM because I couldn't get him to print. The legs and arms kept breaking. It was just too flimsy. But SLA allowed me to actually print this, and a lot smaller than I originally was going to print it. And just the detail on this is insane. The supports came off extremely easy. They worked perfectly because this entire thing had to be printed with supports, but look at that detail. And then last but certainly not least, I printed these Slime Rancher slimes. These weren't anything special. These are something you can print on FDM printers, but they still came out perfectly, and this is normally something that my wife has to sand, get them to look as good as possible, but these came right off the printer and she was able to get to post-processing them. You can really see just how good they look. Now, of course, she did hit these with filler primer and painted on top of them, but if you look at it up close compared to some of my FDM printed slimes, like here you can see the layer lines in the ear, and there's just really no way of cleaning that out with sandpaper or a file or anything like that. It's just too small. And you can see some of the layers here, and my wife did a lot of post-processing, filling and sanding on these to get these to look this good. With SLA, she hardly had to do any of that. Her finishing time was pretty much cut in half, if not more. And then we have this guy. As you can see, the spikes are a little bit translucent. So in game, these crystals are crazy colors, very hard to replicate just by painting. So my wife used a lot of clever techniques to get these the way that they look. Again, links are down in the description if you want to see the full process to get these. But having this semi-transparent and glossy look here is just something that wouldn't be possible with FDM. This is absolutely amazing and just really goes to show you how good SLA can be. And this printer did a phenomenal job printing these. And one interesting thing to note is that this is actually a DLP printer. So basically what that means is that it has a little scanner bar that has lasers in it, and it scans across the entire layer, lighting up the things that need to be cured. So what this means is that each layer takes roughly the same amount of time, no matter how much is on the build plate. So these 4 slimes I printed at the same time, and it took me the exact same amount of time as it took me to print this one slime. Actually, this one took a little bit longer because he's a bit taller. So there were more layers to go through here. So I believe these 4 slimes took just a little bit less than this one did. And that's really the cool thing. Same thing with these chess pieces. It would take me pretty much the same amount of time to print one of them as it would to print all 8 of them. So that's one huge perk of using the DLP system like they have. Prints can go very, very fast if you're printing multiple at a time. So the one thing I really want you guys to take away is that regardless how I feel of the machine, SLA is wonderful, and this machine actually does a really, really good job of printing these things. So even if it's not this printer, I definitely recommend trying resin-based 3D printers. Okay guys, well that was my review of the XYZprinting Nobel 1.0A 3D printer. So overall, I think this is a really good machine. I think it was just paired with some not so great software and practices. So pretty unfortunate, and if the price was lower, I would definitely recommend it. But as it is, I cannot recommend this printer. If money is not an object and you just have cash burning a hole in your pocket, then sure, give it a try. But for the budget-conscious consumer, I don't think this is your solution. So like I said, I am sending this printer back tomorrow. I really would have liked to have more time with it and more materials to play with, because I'm sure with more time put into this and more prints gotten out of this, my opinion would change. But that's not how this works, so given my limited information, that's what I think. Alright guys, I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you guys think. If you've used one of these printers before, let me know down in the comments. I'd really be interested in seeing your thoughts. I can barely find anyone who's used this printer online. Alright guys, thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful in some sort of way. And until next time, keep creating.